Hi, I'm Mart Camoccio, Mart TV, and this is one of our beginner's guides. This is all about mounting a scope onto the gun. If you're new to it, the sort of best practice and the best way to do things, just to be efficient and get it right. And obviously everything stems from the link of the scope to the gun. So we're going to deal with that process and just give you a few pointers. I've got this gun sitting in a gun rest like that. It's in total control. It's by far the best way and the easiest way to do this. You don't need to spend a fortune on gun rests, but I strongly recommend it. It makes all this and several other jobs very easy. So we've got our gun sitting there. Obviously this is a brake barrel spring piston model which has recoil. Now I've competed with spring guns years ago in FT. We always used to use one piece mounts, so I'd recommend that if you really want belts and braces. It kills any scope creep as such, the movement. So use that, or even a damper mount, which will actually help minimise the recoil effect of the scope as well. That's your options. A quick mention is worth saying that if you've got, obviously we've got dovetail rails here, conventional. We've shown these before, but if you wanted to then fit mounts, Picatinny style mounts on for whatever reason, you could then use adapter blocks like that. But for the purposes of this, we've got conventional dovetail rails, and we're going to use two split ring mounts. These are from Sports Match. I'd always recommend this. It's foolhardy. You can really, you can save a few pounds and buy some sort of real cheapo rip-off sort of designs. But Sportsmat, they're top quality. They're just precise, and so it means all that precision translates into a proper grip onto the mounts. Now, the first thing on here, you want to obviously unscrew your top two tops of the rings, which we've done. So there's four. These are double mounting, so there's 4 screws on each. Unscrew all of those. I would say make a note. This might sound really picky, but make a note of exactly how that top came off. So those 4 screws are going to remain the same that go back into each hole. Occasionally you get little anomalies with the thread, and in my experience it just makes sense. Now once we've got that here, you've got to, if you look at the rails, obviously there'd be, this is quite a new rifle, there'll be machine oil inside those grooves. You can use a tissue to degrease. I'll just give you an idea, but I mean you can use it. You just run a tissue inside the rail there, you'll see a bit of dirt come out, and obviously that happens to a greater or lesser degree. The other thing is that on some of these mounts you do have what's called an arrestor stud, and you can see there, on these Sports Match, they have the provision for one. I've taken that one out. Actually, Sports Match, much as I'm a big fan, on some of their mounts they've had a roll pin, and you need to use a hammer to actually move that around. I'll quickly show you. These are quite cheap mounts, but inside the ring you've got the arrestor stud there at the bottom, and that is adjustable with an Allen key inside. And what you want to do, if you do want to use that, make sure that it's adjusted down, and then that locates into the arrestor hole, if there are arrestor holes on your gun, so it corresponds with that. And again, it's just another sort of belts and braces additional feature. Sports Match very cleverly designing the option to reverse. You can see the profile of the dovetail at the bottom there, but if it's not quite gripping correctly for some reason, and there are anomalies and slightly different variations on guns, they give you the option of that bottom clip is actually reversible. So just undo those, turn that round, and the profile at the top is slightly different to the profile at the bottom. Very clever, and it does get you occasionally out of the problems. So now we're going to just gently put our mounts into place. So just gently nip up, hand just with the fingers, those main studs, main bolts on the bottom. I'm just estimating where we think it's going to be. Just nipped, so they're just gently nipped up, so they're not going to fall off. Now, so we've got our mounts just roughly in place. Gently put the scope in position, see whether it looks about right. That's going to look about right there. You can see the mounts aren't too high up against the shoulders. Now, a vital thing here, and you can often overlook it and then see when it's too late, check that the objective bell of the scope actually that isn't touching the cylinder, and that there's total clearance, because obviously one, you need to move that collar. On this one it's an adjustable objective. Secondly, obviously you don't want pressure, there shouldn't be any contact there, or you're going to actually push things, everything will distort and push out. So this all looks fine here, so we're going to just gently put these into position at the start just to get us to a starting point. Now I'm not putting any pressure on these at all, I'm just taking up a lot of the excess at the moment, and do the same with the other one, get that into place. If you're using a pneumatic, I would say also it's a good rule, always only use the small end of the Allen key. You just don't need to hang off it and put loads of torque on. Nothing's going to move with recoilless gun. So obviously it's different on a Springer, you want it to be secure. And with these, once you're feeling any resistance, back off a turn so everything is still totally loose until we've got everything in roughly at the same stage. So all these screws are just before tightening. So everything's totally loose, we can still move the scope. Just very, very gently turn each screw, and you're doing it alternate as if it's a car wheel nut. The minute you feel resistance, stop. And now I've done it on all of those. You can still move the scope because we haven't tightened anything. You're just taking up any slack. The idea is that we can check our eye relief and get that set before we do anything permanent. And, obviously you need to see a full sight picture, and a good rule of thumb is to do the sort of blind approach. So close your eyes, mount the gun comfortably, open your eyes, and if you see a full sight picture, you're there. Now I am actually seeing full sight picture, that's pretty good. So I'm happy with the eye relief there, as in the position where that scope's going to sit. So we put that back, and now before we do anything on these, we're going to fully tighten the base. So just gently nip these up, all in turn, so everything alternate, back, forward, and then alternate within those mounts. And again with just the small end initially of the Allen key. And then once you're happy, so we're pretty happy that that's going to be the final position of these mounts. So I've nipped that up as hard as I can with the small end. Because it's a Springer, I will now go to the hard end, the long end. We've got far more leverage. Put it in and just a small turn extra. And that's all you need. And again, alternate back to front all the time. So you're spreading that torque and the whole pressure across it. So now we've got really tight base mounts. Now we want to set the actual reticule, and there's several ways of doing this. I tend to personally do it by eye. And one final point I would mention is that because this is a spring gun, we talked about you can use a one-piece mount. You can also use arrestor blocks. Now, obviously on here, actually we've got a clearance. There's a bit of problem with clearance under this particular scope. You probably use slightly higher mounts or a smaller arrestor block, but you can actually place arrestor blocks on the rail behind the mount, and again it all helps to kill the movement. You can get scope creep, and either the mount will move on the gun or the scope will move within the mounts themselves. So we've talked about levelling the reticule, and as I say, a good way of doing that is you can get these spirit level devices. You can put a spirit level on top of the turret, and then you can obviously level everything up, and you'll see the reticule nicely level. If your top of the turret isn't particularly completely flat, take that off. You should find that the actual mechanics are, and then you can sit that on, get everything nicely level, and then set the scope to that particular point. Once you're now happy, so we're assuming that we're happy now, we've set the reticule, we've still got these technically slightly loose. So again, like the side ones, we're treating these like wheel nuts, just alternate, very loose, very gently tighten, alternate screws, back and front, alternate corners, stick to that. And again, we're using the small end. Nip all those up. Once you feel resistance, just put a tiny bit more tweak, until you've completely got everything tight. That's it. And then towards the end, because it's a springer, I would go to the use the longer end and just gently nip everything. As I say, absolutely alternate until you've got everything totally tight. And there we are. People have different ideas and different little tips how they do things, but that's how I've done it for years, and it's served me well. So I hope that's helped.